Nimi, it is all about making experiences of art a lot more engaging and is really about the way that you can connect with other people. You develop a true sense of connection and friendship that you don't get if you just go to a random networking event. I escaped 9 to 5, so now I work 24/7. You shouldn't have an NFT strategy. That's like saying you have a JPEG strategy. To just be a little bit experimental and less overthinking around decisions, I can really fake it until I make it on anything.
Welcome to the podcast. It's called Escape 9 to 5. It's my podcast that I want to tell people that there's a different way of life and you don't always have to go down the 9 to 5 route. It's my excuse to interview people like yourself who are very inspiring. And also I need a lot of advice for my own Escape 9 to 5 journey as well. So thank you so much for coming.
I'm glad to be here, and that's really cool that you started first explanation of the title of the podcast, because when you said Escape 9 to 5, the fact that we're talking, in my head, I immediately thought of the fact that I escaped 9 to 5, so now I work 24/7.
Actually, I've heard that term because I'm now currently in the accelerator, okay. And then people say that meme, I escape 9 to 5 only to work 24/7. Yeah. But I think that's different because you're working yourself, you're working for something that you're passionate about. So before we start, I said that we wanted to start by two truths and a lie. And you want me to ask you two truths and a lie, whether that's true or lie. That would be the first lie. Escape 9 to 5. Is it escape 9 to 5 that you get to decide where to work, how to work, or is it not true?
I think you can definitely decide where and how to work in an entrepreneurial path, but what will likely be the case is that it's going to be your entire life. You may decide that you want your entire life to be in Porto instead of London. You can be a startup entrepreneur in a different location, but it will be your entire life. So I think that boundary between work and life doesn't exist in a startup founder's mindset.
Okay, I have another one. This statement. So you want to escape 9 to 5 because you want to be your own boss. You don't want to work for anyone else. Is that true?
My true answer as opposed to my lie. I don't think that is about not wanting to work for someone else. If people going into an entrepreneurial path simply because they cannot work under other people or working with other bosses, that's the wrong motivation, because I do think that if anything, being your own boss actually is a lot harder than having someone else as your boss. And a lot of time having the right mindset around how do you manage yourself and manage others and manage upward to investors is actually a much harder thing than you think. So I do think that a lot of times learning from an institutional setting, whether that's like a large or small employer, the people side of things, of like organizational dynamics, is something that a lot of people can prioritize a bit more when they were in a 9 to 5 job. Because I think those skills are much harder to learn when you're trying to hire your first 5 or 10 or 15 or 50 employees.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I heard it somewhere else that when you're your own boss, you're not working for somebody else. And then there's a serial entrepreneur. He's like, but then you're working for everyone who's going to give you the money. So to keep your venture survive, because it's like your child, right? You couldn't like it. Those are two statements are all lie and not correct. If you share one statement that you think is true in your journey as an entrepreneur,
I think you really have to be so confident and humble at the same time in everything you do. There are not enough people out there who recognize that those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can be very, very confident about your vision and your conviction, but also being willing to admit that you're wrong or you don't know everything. So I think it's a very interesting journey to learn how to strike that balance in everything you do, like in terms of both in your own team, building your own team, in selling something that doesn't exist in the market, and selling your own company to investors.
I actually heard it yesterday from a serial entrepreneur as well, and he's like, advice to you if you start your own company is to hire people who are better than you, who know things more than you do, because then you don't need to even touch whatever they do. They do so much better.
And I do think that ability to push yourself enough to be actually scared of your own team members or your employees in a way, because like they're so good that you feel incompetent. You have to be able to get to that state of feeling like you have a lot more to learn from other people around you, because if you are the best person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes, exactly. I think you touch upon a little bit about what you can learn from the traditional jobs, the 9 to 5. And I usually ask people, what's the one moment that in your 11 years of 9 to 5 job that make you change, that you wanted to pivot into an entrepreneurial journey? If you can share one story or one moment.
Interesting. So I definitely don't think it's a single moment, but the moment that when you asked me the question, the first thought that came to my mind was when I realized that I had put so much sweat and tears and a lot of my own sort of investment of time and resources and brain power into something that I may not have control of. So I think in my old career, I definitely felt like I worked so hard, and I was passionate about what I did, but I felt like I didn't have as much of that direct control or impact of like how the outcome would be. And I think getting to a point, and it might be specific to everybody, and it's not so much about whether you're going to start a business in the same vertical, but that sense of purpose and impact is universal in a way. Like, I think your moment that you feel like your potential of making an impact isn't something that you can fully realize in your current 9 to 5, that might be when you start thinking about what your true calling is, or what would give you that sense of satisfaction. Yeah. So I think that's definitely the journey for me in a kind of unique way, because I did advance very fast in my old career. So I got to a point where I was a significant shareholder of a business, but recognizing that there's a lot more that I can deliver and a lot more that I wanted to achieve. My satisfaction in the job is no longer about what the next year is going to be about, like how does my next 10 years look like? And I think that's when I realized that if I don't see myself being a driver of growth or a driver of how the business is going for the next 10 years, I don't know if I can justify the amount of investment of my own time.
I think a lot of people, they have been through the traditional 9 to 5 job up to a point. They come to realization that possibly it's time to do something else, because we all only live once, right? And then it's up to us how to craft the story for our life, rather than craft the story for somebody else's dream. Might as well just build our own dream. So when did you change? How long has it been since then?
Nimi, so my current startup, was a very early idea about like 2.5 years ago. And then it took me maybe 6-7 months to then like kind of got to a point of, yes, this is something more than just an idea. And then we launched shortly after that. So about 18 months ago was when we launched.
Oh, that's exciting. Oh, so it's around 2 years? Yeah. Sort of. So it's a 2-year-old baby and just started to walk. We transitioned into the part that we talk about what now. Nimi, as I learned, is focused on art, the full picture of what you envision this venture to be like. What is it now, and why did you come up with this idea? Why are you passionate about this?
Definitely. So for Nimi, our vision of the world is very much about the fact that the world will be truly a better place if more people get to experience art and inspiration in their everyday life. So our mission is making art a lot more accessible, a lot more exciting and engaging for millennials. So specifically people in their late 20s and 30s who work stressful jobs and have a lot of the societal pressures around their productivity. So we set out initially in that broader mission of democratizing access to art to support who we think is a very important anchor in this broader ecosystem, which is museums and art institutions. So we feel like if we empower them more to be able to deliver exciting and very engaging content and engaging ways to appeal to young people, that would be serving this broader mission as well. So we started out very much going after museums in the first year. year, helping them engaging with young people through what we refer to as a loyalty program that leverage NFT and blockchain technology.
Yeah.
So that means that any regular museum visitors, like any of us, when you go through an exhibition, so you have an emotional attachment to this particular painting that you see, and it really speaks to you. You have a chance right away to collect a token from that painting, and you become one of, let's say, 100 people around the world that collect this particular token to demonstrate your love for this artwork. And that's kind of a way for you to capture that moment and capture right away your interest and your connection with this exhibition or this particular painting. And then museums also are able to invite you back to join like special events and special talks that are very much about the exhibitions that you love. So a lot of it is going to be more about loyalty and engagement rather than the existing membership model, which is like a pay-to-play model, where the higher you donate, the more of a high-level patron you become, which isn't necessarily the right mentality to approach what we call a generation of cultural omnivores. So any of us is an omnivorous consumer in the sense that we want to experiment with different types of art and culture. We want to sample a broader menu of options rather than committing ourselves to a single museum. So we see an opportunity to really turn the traditional membership model into more of a community building exercise where you love something, you get a chance to collect a memento and adopt that. So that was really our focus, and we have 2 large museum clients. We have many museums in the pipeline that are adopting and piloting the model, but we recognize that that journey is going to take time because museums are centuries old institutions in some cases. The same model has existed for so long. So for them to change is going to take time. And along the journey, we recognize that that same mission of democratizing access to art can also be started from the perspective of us delivering something for consumers directly to make it exciting for them to experience art as well. So in the last 6 months, we actually, by mistake or completely by chance, developed an organic community around us in London. It's a modest community of about 200 people that are very engaged. So we haven't marketed it in any way. So it was completely organic. And the community gets together every week for an art experience. And we started this month launching our first monthly calendar that people can follow and join. The feedback has been great, and we feel like there's an opportunity for us to develop that side of Nimi to be more of a social club for art enthusiasts. And the exciting part was that community is very diverse. So people who may be anywhere on the full spectrum of knowing a lot or very little about art, and also from very diverse industry background, people who work in professional services to tech to creative sector. And the common thing that we heard a lot is that by the time that you're reaching your early or mid or late 30s, your social network is very, very homogenous. You likely meet other people that work in the same industry, in the same sector. That same kind of pain point exists across all different bubbles within a city like London, right? So the art actually becomes a really interesting and unique premise to just bring people together. And you may not be talking about art the whole time. You go to art galleries and exhibitions, but you may be talking about anything.
You have a starting point.
You develop a true sense of connection and friendship that you don't get if you just go to a random networking event. And that's been really exciting and interesting, and we can uncover some of what we call our own proprietary insights around the consumers and how do we crack the science of creating inspirations and connections in a world that's moving so fast and so much around product and so much around
so many questions. At the beginning, I guess if people want to collect a token, do you need to own the artwork at the beginning? Like Nimi need to own the artwork? No?
We're not fractionalizing ownership in any way. So the token is very much a utility token rather than like ownership of an artwork. So museums don't sell the artwork. They cannot sell the artwork. And that's actually the biggest challenge that museums face because they sit on such valuable assets, which is the entire collection, but they cannot monetize it efficiently. So what they monetize is not the artwork, right? What they monetize is the fact that they have, how do they allow people to access the content in a way that is more targeted and more segmented. So let's say if you love Impressionist art okay, so, so you love Monet, and right now when you walk through the museum, let's say you walk through the Courtauld Gallery or the National Gallery, the museums right now don't have any insights on like what your consumer preferences are. Like, what do you like? The only thing that they market to you is a membership that is simply a ticket discount, right? Like most of the time, the idea of a membership is you pay for a membership and you can go as many times a year as you want, right? And some exclusive events. But the majority of people don't commit themselves to one gallery and say that we're going to go to this one gallery, 10 times a year. They want us to be able to sample. You love Monet, so you would want us to go to all the different museums that have Monet. So imagine that this is the model where if you collect a token that is a replica of the Monet painting, and we don't believe that that token itself has any intrinsic value. Right. The point is that what does that token allow you to do, which is that like the museums are going to invite you to behind the scene viewings of like Monet paintings or Impressionist paintings that are too fragile to be displayed in public. You're going to be able to go to another museum and like with your Monet token, you're going to have access to unique engagement benefits when it comes to Impressionist paintings, for example, right? And you're going to be able to showcase as well that you're a patron supporting the art with something that's like a social proof, like carrying your tote bag around. But in this case, you have this token that demonstrates that you're actually one of the 500 people around the world that love Impressionist art and like would travel for Monet.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it's really a segmentation tool, right? To be able to say that you're a different kind of fan than like me, who like love, let's say, pop art, and give you a sense that you're actually going to be curating your own gallery and your own collection of like the artworks that you love and which museums in the world they sit at.
Let's say if I'm the target market, then I own a token of one of the painting of Monet, and basically your platform is like an app or a community that can get all my preferences and will prompt me about what's going on in the world of Impressionists. And then if I'm traveling to one city, then it tells me all the museums have that. And then also you will have community to arrange activities. That's essentially what you're doing with Nimi.
And I think it's really about making it so much more about a loyalty and engagement model, right? So the more you go, the more you support museums, the more you get to do and the more you get to see, rather than the traditional model, which is that the ultra high net worth actually has access to this really cool, tight-knit, community that continue to reinforce itself. So like it's not a coincidence that all the most successful executives and CEOs and exited founders and investors suddenly love art. Like suddenly they start collecting art and are like holding amazing art collection. But why is that? Because so much of art is about the community and the connection and the people that you get to hang out with and you meet. And art is just the excuse to also like inspire yourself to think about all these different stories that you can bring together. My personal experience of collecting my first piece of art, not long ago. I've always been an art fan all my life, but I bought my first piece of art from an artist a few months ago. And what it took was I got to know a gallery from my work, from Nimi. The gallery invites me to an art fair. I went to the art fair, I met the artist, talked to the artist about his art, and then I was interested in collecting his art, but I was still like on the fence. I chickened out because I'd never done this before. I don't know how it works. I don't know if I can negotiate, right? And then me and my partner walk around, and then we were leaving. As we were leaving to think about it, we bumped into our really good friends who are like seasoned collectors who have been collecting for like 30 years, and they talk to us about it, and it turns out they collect from the same artists, and like they then talk about the journey of collecting this artist, and they walk us back to the gallery, and they told the gallerists that we're their friends and we should get a discount because we're their friends, right?
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of one very small example of how people got to be in this broader ecosystem. It is illustrating the fact that like a lot of people don't know where to start to even like demonstrate that they're a lover of art, right? So we really wanted to break it down and make it a lot more accessible for people to be in a broader community of others who like art. You may decide to buy art one day, or you may not. You may always be an admirer of art, but you should be able to access these kind of communities in a much simpler way. So we're working to really scale and democratize that.
I think art is one of the missing piece in the modern society because it's so pure when you look at art that people paint hundreds of years ago, but you still feel the same emotion, and then you can express it. You can feel different feelings whenever in your own life. It depends on what type of days you're going through. And I remember, because I used to work in investment bank, I was in Hong Kong, there's always Art Basel every single year. It became such a event that like it feels like it's only certain type of people who are very, very excited about it. And then I would go as well because I have the ticket because of my friends. They have tickets, but then it would be great like if Nimi as a community that gives people access to those events. So it actually, like you said, democratized the access of such a high value. The artist itself is high value.
And it's fascinating that it is very highly concentrated among the 1% or 0.0 something percent, right? And they have an incentive to make it exclusive and make it less and less transparent and more opaque naturally. So in the last decade or so, there have been a whole flow and lots of interesting startups that came out that are all about democratizing the buying and selling of art, which is really just like one part of the picture, right? Like if people are out there looking to buy art, now there are more platforms that kind of make it easier for them to buy directly from artists. But we also believe that experiencing art is not just about buying it, it's about being able to admire art, right? And so much of our recent, in the last couple of decades or so, the rush and the desire to kind of have higher returns on investment as investors or retail or institutional investors have led art to become an alternative asset class. So people invest in art without even looking at it, and is stored away in some vaults, right? And there's own kind of fractional ownership, so that anybody can kind of buy 0.01% of a very famous painting. But the sad reality with that is there's less of a focus on just the simple act of admiring and appreciating art, and the community you can build around that. So we see that gap as really the opportunity for Nimi, because we're there to be a lot more about the experience and the community, which is kind of the earlier stages of anyone even getting to the idea of like, maybe I'll buy something for myself.
Exactly. So when you first started, right, you to get access to the museums, and what type of museums you get access to? Like, who are the first group of museum that's very forward thinking that they say, oh, let's work with Nimi? And what would be the next group of museums that you wanted to go next?
Yeah, the beginning of the journey was kind of very interesting and maybe typical startup in a way. Before Nimi was even incorporated, when I just started feeling really interested in this space, I just cold call. I reach out to people that I can find on the internet. I also leverage my undergrad alumni network because I went to a liberal arts school in the US, Bryn Mawr College, so it's one of the Seven Sisters, and many alumni actually did go into the arts, and some of them are quite senior at different museums. So I went on a listening tour and reached out to as many people as I could. Ended up talking to people that are in senior positions, anywhere from the curatorial side to people who work in marketing and fundraising and development to museum leadership, to understand the problem and the challenge. And naturally, that happened to be more in the US on the East Coast at the largest museums on the East Coast. So that's kind of where we started. We really started on like that journey of understanding the problems at the largest institutions. When we have a solution and a product, and we went back on the circuit and talking to a lot of museums, some of the European museums sometimes are a bit more innovative in some ways. And so the first museum that we work with on that model of that, sort of like fractional tokens as a memento is the Belvedere Museum in Vienna. And it's a state-owned large institution. They have Gustav Klimt's The Kiss painting as their most famous artwork. And the museum rely very much on two main sources of income. One is government support and the other is tourists and the ticket sales, which means that with COVID, that completely went out of the window. So the immediate need for funding was really real. The project that leveraged kind of NFT to create small fragments of the painting that anyone around the world can adopt and dedicate it to someone they love, because the painting is The Kiss and is a very romantic painting. That was really the initial concept, and it's like a crowdfunding model. And the museum raised $5 million from the project of supporters from 50 countries around the world. And it's very much like the idea of kind of adopting an artwork, or instead of the Sackler family or all these famous families putting their name on the wall. Yeah. And then we have to kind of now juggle with this money is from and what's behind all of that wealth. This is kind of tapping into the power of the mass and really letting everyone have a chance to do something they love, and empower them. So I think when they're empowered, like, you can definitely see a lot more agency and a lot more of a desire to care for it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. 5 million, that's your first project, is in Europe. That's huge. And is that the biggest one?
It's very interesting because a lot of other museums that we're working with, also very large museums in New York, for example, the focus is not on immediate revenue. Also, there's slightly different funding model for European museums versus US museums. Yeah. US museums have had a much more mature approach around private donors and ultra high net worth and private donors, opposed to relying on government funding, because the US government doesn't fund the art as much as in Europe. So the focus for a lot of US museums that we're working with is actually on engagement. So they don't have like headline figure of how much they can raise in this year, but rather how many new people can they engage with right now or this year, even if that's like at $0 contribution to the museum today. How do they engage with new audiences, deepening their relationship with existing audiences in a way that this base of audience continue to be the supporters 15 years from now. So the focus is a lot on engagement. We're working on some really interesting kind of gamification and engagement projects there for museums, and but in parallel with work that we have directly with consumer and the community, we're able to really kind of have that synergy between the two, because we have this kind of core incubator of a community that helps us understand behaviors and really interesting kind of patterns around how consumers behave in the wild. And then we're able to apply that to our work with museums, to advise museums how best to really kind of nudge and kind of gamify their engagement. Yeah. And then vice versa, the work with museums that we have would help us bring a very interesting, unique offering to the consumers.
It sounded like to me, so this is your current business model you have in the US. Depending on which market you operate and depending on their revenue model, you have a play for them, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year plan for Nimi.
Yeah, so we're really excited about where we could push in the next 12 to 18 months on the community and consumer side, starting with a few key hubs, metropolitan, and then continue to forward with the path that I had with the museums in terms of paving the path for something that would ultimately become more like almost like network equivalent to like an airline alliance of museums around the world that buy into this vision that we shouldn't gatekeep our audiences. The point for each of the museums is not to build their own membership base and guard that exclusively, because they don't compete with each other in any way. Consumers are very much the same audience, and we really wanted to advocate for that model where like the Nimi network of museums will benefit all museums involved and also the community that we build directly in the arts, which actually are going to benefit the art sector as a whole rather than just museums. So museums are just one of the many key stakeholders. There are commercial galleries, there are artists, and there's really the commercial art market out there too.
Yeah. The concept of Nimi, like art, I believe because you've been working on this for so long, you must have explained this idea to so many people, right? What's the most funniest reaction or when people don't understand what's going on? Like one story that you can share with us. It's very difficult to explain your idea to someone.
Interesting. I think it is common for people to not get it. It's not common for the reaction to be funny. Who like would show up on a Zoom meeting, and I have 15 minutes, but I wanted to just like put it out there that I am like against NFT. Like I don't get it. I'm never gonna get it. It's not like something for me. And then I took made the best of the 15 minutes that I had and explained to them that it's not about the NFT. NFT is not even a thing. You shouldn't have an NFT strategy. That's like saying you have like a JPEG strategy, right? So after 15 minutes, we're like, nobody has explained it to me before like this, right? Like maybe I have a bit more time. Like let's talk more. One thing that I do learn, and I guess also a potential benefit from my past career in consulting, is really to meet people where they are and need to create a space for them to be potentially hostile towards your idea, right? And they have to be comfortable enough to even say that they don't like it. So I think there are a lot of founders out there who are very passionate, and sometimes too passionate to be accepting of the idea that someone may not get what you're doing, right? And that actually may shut many doors that they don't realize.
I found it very interesting because you're my third guest. The first and second episode, they all touch upon this idea about communication. Communication is one of the things that I see, like you said, you meet people where they are, because when they're like on the fence, they wouldn't listen to you. Then they will remember Nimi in 2 sentences. What will you tell people about Nimi? What is Nimi?
Yeah. Okay. Our tagline, Nimi, the name, actually means muse of memory. It's actually the Anglus of the actual name of the Greek muse of memory. And museum, as the word, is from the concept of a temple of memory, because you're worshiping memories of art and music and different forms of art. Nimi, it is all about making experiences of art and of new inspirations that you can have from art a lot more engaging, and is really about the way that you can connect with other people.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Muse of memory. Muse of memory. So beautiful. Let's do a lightning round.
Okay.
So lightning round, because your background in art, what is your favorite style of art?
Yeah. I really do change from the time right now, and it was not how I was a year ago. I'm really into like super colorful expressionism. Okay. So it's really like how the artist was feeling something and trying to not hold anything back, and just kind of splashing everything on the page, whatever he or she was feeling. And it may not make a lot of logical sense to someone else, but it is gonna evoke different emotions. And like you said, emotions as something that are timeless. Like some people go through the same set of anger and happiness and sadness like for centuries. So I am really interested in the idea of how someone expressed those difficult emotions in their art.
What's your favorite artist and one favorite painting or art piece?
Okay, so again, it's just the mood of the day. I don't have a universal answer. Right now, I really like this photographer, artist from Ghana. His name is Prince Gayazi. He has this condition called synesthesia, which is when you hear a word, you have a color in your head.
Or you can feel that when you listen to some kind of...
So your senses are connected, right? Any words would have like a color in his mind, for example, and he does photography, but really kind of like highly choreographed photography. So like all the images have some kind of meaning and the colors have a meaning in his mind. And he was chosen recently as the first African artist that was featured in the Pirelli calendar. So Pirelli, the tire company, has a 60-year-long annual tradition of having their iconic calendar being a piece of art that's created by an artist, and he's the one chosen for this year, 2024. And he's done amazing work, and everyone should give him a link.
Well, that's so cool. Thank you so much. You learned a lot. If you were to give yourself, when you start your business, knowing what you know now, what would the one piece of advice that you give it to yourself?
Wow. I wouldn't say that I am self-critical. I'm myself enough, but I also always like the idea of keeping tab of all the major decisions that I made, or decisions that I think are pivotal I made, and then track how do I still align with that decision over time, because maybe within 6 months of making a decision I realized, oh, that was wrong, like that was like the wrong thing to do, but who knows, like 2 years later I look back and I could see that maybe it was actually like the smartest thing that I've done that didn't pay off in the short term. So I love that concept of just like keep going back and thinking about how you would have done it differently at every moment of my journey. Not self-doubt at all, but from a learning perspective of like using yourself as a case, like you have your own way of like experimenting with it. So I think the advice I would give myself at the beginning, if I were at the beginning of the journey, would be to just be a little bit experimental and less overthinking around decisions. I think I would probably want to make sure that I do less overthinking and more of kind of that retrospective after action analysis.
That's so good. Because I am working in climate tech, and I decided to add this to all the lightning round question, which is, have you ever heard of carbon dioxide removal?
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
Yes. Yeah.
This is good. But carbon dioxide removal means that there's companies who are actually removing atmospheric CO2 from the atmosphere. Yeah. It's different from offset.
Yeah. Which is really exciting.
Yeah, which is very exciting. I need to add that to all my interviews. But so now, exciting part is you have a question from the previous guest. What's one childhood lesson that you carry with you today?
Okay. The childhood lesson, I really think that I can really fake it until I make it on anything. Because I faked it that I knew how to drum in a marching band, and I could pick it up enough to be able to actually drum in a marching band, and I fake it that I could speak English, and I self-taught English. So I think those are probably pretty hard things that I've done as a kid that I could do something of a similar level at the adult scale in life. But so that's I think
that's your childhood lesson. That's so good. It's your chance to leave a question for the next guest.
Maybe the question would be, do they attribute more of their success, however they defined it, to hard work or luck?
Thank you so much. We will leave the question for the audience as well. Do you attribute your success to hard work or luck? Leave a comment down below, engage with us. And this is, and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. High five. For vlogs. Selfie. It's not selfie, it's a video.
Oh, it's a video.
Oh, it's a video.
So we're supposed to.
I think my video editor has a lot of work to do.